Shalom, my name is Shalhevet Schwartz, and this is Gefet on Daf Yomi, a joint project of Hadran and Yeshivat Drisha. The sugya that we'll be exploring on today's Daf Mem Tet of Chullin, is a sort of tangent from a conversation about doing a treifot to a neat little sugya about Birkat Kohanim, and about the extent to which Kohanim themselves are included in or included among those blessed by the bracha, blessed maybe by a different bracha. And we're going to explore a little bit about the ramifications of that. Right? It's a machloket tanaim, and we'll see that the implications of that for other halakhic questions. Just a word of introduction, if you're listening to this in the United States, then Birkat Kohanim is something that we're more or less familiar with, mostly from Chagim, but in Meikar Adin, it's theoretically it's supposed to be a mitzvah that is practiced every single day, and in Eretz Yisrael nowadays it is still practiced every single day. The Kohanim get up and duchen and bless Am Yisrael. So hopefully this will be an opportunity on a Yom Chol to think a little bit about a bracha that we don't necessarily get to experience so often in full. Let's jump in. The sugya on Daf Mem Tet, right, starts with a conversation about the chelev she'al gabei keva. Right, specific facts that are on the stomach of an animal, and Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani Amar Rabbi Yoshaya, chelev she'al gabei keva kohanim nahagu bo heter ki Rabbi Yishmael she'amar mishum avutav. So there's a position permitting these specific facts that are on the stomach, which is relevant not only to Kohanim, but in particular for Kohanim, because these are the keva is one of the parts of the animal that is one of the matanot kehuna. This is a position noted here as the position of Rabbi Yishmael she'amar mishum avotav, Rabbi Yishmael's position in the name of his ancestors. And we know from all over Shas that Rabbi Yishmael himself was indeed a Kohen. So Rav Nachman Rabbi Yoshe gives us a little mnemonic to remember this, right? That this is the position of Rabbi Yishmael. Simanech Yishmael kahana mesaya kahane. So the Yishmael the Kohen is helping the Kohanim, right? Yishmael the priest is helping the priests here by a lenient position about a part of the animal that really was one of the matanot kehuna. But it seems that this saying extends beyond the particular din mentioned here, extends beyond the particular din of treifot, right? The Gemara goes on to ask, Maihi, right? What is that saying really referring to? The saying Yishmael kahana mesaya kahane. It was primarily referring to something else, and that saying is used as a mnemonic for this particular conversation about the chelev she'al gabei keva. But so now the Gemara is trying to understand, okay, where's that phrase from, and why are we saying it? From where do we know that Yishmael the Kohen is helping the Kohanim? So Gemara quotes a Breita, D'Tanya. And now we're going into the psukim that describe Birkat Kohanim in the Torah, right? Which in which God tells the Kohanim, "Ko tevarechu et bnei Yisrael." So thus you shall bless bnei Yisrael. And on that pasuk, Rabbi Yishmael omer, "Lamadnu beracha Yisrael mipi Kohanim, leKohanim atzman lo lamad." Right? If all we had were that pasuk, we would know that, or we would learn that there's a bracha for Yisrael that happens through the mouths of the Kohanim, but we would have no way of knowing, or no way of learning that the Kohanim themselves are blessed. Kshehu omer, right, when the end of that little parshiah, Birkat Kohanim, finishes off with the words of Va'ani avarechem, right, and I will bless them. Heve omer, Kohanim mevarechim liYisrael, v'Hakadosh Baruch Hu mevarech leKohanim. So the way that Rabbi Yishmael is understanding Va'ani avarechem, and I will bless them. Who is the them there? The them is the Kohanim. So the Kohanim are going to bless Bnei Yisrael, and I, aka right Hashem in this scheme, in turn blesses the Kohanim. But Ani Avarachem is that an additional thing that happens in this Birkat Kohanim process is that God also grants an additional blessing to the priests themselves. Rabbi Akiva interprets this differently. Lamadnu bracha Yisrael mipi Kohanim mipi gvura lo lamadnu. Sure, if all right from Ko tevarechu bnei Yisrael, God tells the Kohanim to bless Am Yisrael. We know that, okay, the Kohanim are blessing Am Yisrael, but we don't know that thereby God actually blesses Am Yisrael. We don't know that the blessing of that the Bnei Yisrael receive is really the blessing of God. כשהוא אומר, ואני אברכם, הווה אומר, כהנים מברכים לישראל, והקדוש ברוך הוא מסכים על ידם. So the words va'ani avarichem, according to Rabbi Akiva, are coming to teach us something different. They're not coming to teach us that the Kohanim are getting blessed. They're coming to teach us that, right, you bless Israel, God says to the Kohanim, va'ani avarichem, and right, the ikar here, right, and I will bless them. The them is referring to Bnei Israel also. But the ikar here is the I, va'ani avarichem, right? You say the words, but I will kind of assent to your blessing, and I will bless them as well. So that's the Breita. Rabbi Ishmael thinks va'ani avarichem, I will bless them, refers to the Kohanim. Rabbi Akiva thinks va'ani avarichem, I will bless them, refers to Bnei Israel. And what's really critical about that phrase is the va'ani. You say the words, and I will assent to your blessing. Then the Gemara goes on, Ela Rabbi Akiva b'racha Kohanim minale. So right, so Rabbi Ishmael, we know how Rabbi Ishmael figured out that the Kohanim get blessed, but from where does Rabbi Akiva learn the idea that the Kohanim too receive blessing? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak mi v'avaracham v'avarechecha. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak takes us back to Sefer Bereshit, where in God's blessing to Abraham, he says, v'avaracham v'avarechecha, I will bless those who bless you. So now the Kohanim are in the position of the mevarechecha, right? They're blessing Am Yisrael, so they should receive bracha from God. All right. So Rabbi Akiva too seems to think that not explicit in the Breita maybe, but Rabbi Akiva also thinks the Kohanim get blessed. Okay, so now the Gemara asks, Uma Masaya Kahane. So in what sense is Rabbi Ishmael assisting the Kohanim? In what sense is Rabbi Ishmael's position any better for the Kohanim than Rabbi Akiva's? If we've just determined that Rabbi Akiva also thinks that the Kohanim receive blessing. The Gemara's answer, and I'll try to translate it as literally as possible, because there's going to be a machloket, or a bit of a machloket Rashi Tosafot about what it means. Demokila lebirkat kohanim bimkom beracha liYisrael, right? That the beracha of the kohanim is established in the same place as, or in the place of, not instead of, in the place of a beracha for Yisrael. So what does that mean? Rashi's gonna give us one take. So Rashi explains both the question and the answer. Umay Messiah Yael. In what sense is Messiah Kahane, is Rabbi Ishmael any more of an asset for the Kohanim? Ho'il Rabbi Akiva nami eat le bracha leKohanim mikra acharina. Right? Given that Rabbi Akiva also thinks the Kohanim are also getting blessed, in what sense is Rabbi Ishmael any better? The answer: b'makom bracha liYisrael. Eitzel Birkat Yisrael. It's adjacent to the bracha, or adjacent or alongside the bracha of Yisrael. Right? That the Kohen, according to Rabbi Akiva, the Kohanim bless Yisrael, and because of the Avaracham Avarechecha and Sefer Bereshit, they too get blessed. Sure. But according to Rabbi Ishmael, right, the pasuk says, right, V'samu Shemei b'nei Yisrael v'ani avarachem, right, the minute that they bless Israel, and kind of through that or alongside that, together with that, I bless them, the Kohanim, says God. Right, Eitzel Birkat Yisrael, Dehafli Adifa, Demachma Demit Barachim, Heim Imashar. Right, it's better that way, to be blessed kind of alongside or together with the rest of Bnei Israel. Rabbi Ishmael helps the priests in that they're blessed kind of directly and together with the blessing for Bnei Israel. Tosafot takes us in a slightly different direction. Right, Tosafot going back to the Breita. Right, the Breita which says Rabbi Akiva thinks Vani Avarachem means I will bless them, Bnei Israel. And God will assent to the blessing of the Kohanim. That's the chiddush of Va'ani Avarachem according to Rabbi Akiva. Tosafot says on that, the Rabbi Ishmael lo itzrich kra lahachi dipshita demaskim kevan shitziva lahem levarech. Rabbi Ishmael doesn't need a pasuk to tell us that the Kohanim's bracha is going to work. For Rabbi Akiva says the fact that the Kohanim's bracha is going to work, that God is going to assent or agree to it, that's what Va'ani Avarachem is coming to tell us, coming to teach us. Rabbi Ishmael says, no, that's silly. It can't be coming to teach us. That's obvious. God told them to bless the people. Of course it's going to work. So Va'ani Avarachem must be coming to teach us something else about the blessing that the Kohanim themselves receive. So according to Tosafot's understanding here, right, on some level, the Rabbi Ishmael's the sense in which Rabbi Yishmael's position is better for the priests is that it's obvious to him, right? It's obvious to Rabbi Yishmael that God would assent to their blessing. Right, it's on some level confidence in the Kohanim and in the effectiveness of their bracha. Right, that's what Rabbi Yishmael is giving to the Kohanim here. Right, what is the kind of help to the priests in Rabbi Yishmael's drasha from the pasuk? According to Rashi, right, the fact that the Kohanim are blessed directly via their own blessing. According to Tosafot, the fact that he doesn't require an additional pasuk to tell us that God would, assent to their bracha. Right, for Rashi, help to the priests receiving the blessing together with Am Yisrael. Whereas for Tosafot, it's really about Rabbi Yishmael's confidence in the priests, confidence that their blessing, that even without a special pasuk telling us that their blessing would already be effective. Okay, that was all part one, and in some ways all by way of introduction. But what we're going to get into now is an interesting kind of halakhic, quasi-halakhic, but sort of debate among the Achronim about how to answer a kushya of the Pri Megadim. About Birkat Kohanim and about how really to understand Va'ani Avarachim. So, just for a little bit of context, there's a story that we're going to get up to in maybe about a month and a half in Masechet Chullin about someone who was not properly honoring his parents and the court wanted to basically force him to fulfill the mitzvah of kibbud avim. We know in general that kofin al mitzvot aseh, that the Beit Din is authorized to coerce people or force people to perform mitzvot aseh. It's not something that's done nowadays, but according to the Gemara, that's the principle, that the court also has on some level an educational role to play, or a pedagogical role to play in enforcing mitzvot aseh. So there's a case of someone who's not performing kibbud avim, and I too have a hahu gavra to lo avim meyaker v'imeh. Not doing kibbud avim, they brought him to court. Kaftu, they tied him up. Amar lehu, and there's this story about a fellow whose name I'm forgetting right now, but who this is one of the many ways in which he is proving his he's being a bit of a smart aleck, but proving his proficiency in halakha here. Amar lehu shavkuhu detanya kol mitzvat aseh shematan schara b'tzida ein beit din shamata musharin alaha. All so this man says leave him be. Don't start to give him lashes or whatever it is so that he performs the mitzvah of kibbud avim. Why? Because we've got a breita. And the breita says, any mitzvah aseh matan schara b'tzida, we'll discuss what that means in a second, a specific class of mitzvot aseh, ein beit din shamata musharin alaha. Beit din shamata, right, the human courts are not supposed to be enforcing performance of those mitzvot. What does it mean, mitzvah aseh matan schara b'tzida? The class of mitzvot aseh whose reward is written alongside or along with the mitzvah itself. So kibbud avim is a classic example of this. Kabed et avicha v'et imecha, says the Torah. Leman yarichun yamecha, or leman yitavach leman yarichun yamecha. Forgetting exactly how the pasuk ends, but promises a long life and a long and good life for those who perform this mitzvah. So the mitzvah where the reward is kind of goes hand in hand with the commandment, that the lower court, the Beit Din Shamat, the human courts can kind of throw up their hands and let people make the mistakes that they're going to make, and people should realize that there's what to be gained by performing these mitzvot. So that's a general principle here. Now, the Pri Megadim is going to in the Mishpatzot Zahav, the commentary on the Taz, notes this ruling in the Taz. That a Kohen shelo ratzah la'alot makinot ha'achetitzein nafsho. That if a Kohen does not want to give the priestly blessing, one can force him because of, right, can give him lashes, or can force him because of this principle of kofin al mitzvot aseh, that one can coerce people to perform mitzvot aseh. Now, the Pri Megadim is going to ask about this. Whoa. Our sugya promises the Kohanim reward for the fact that they bless Am Yisrael, right? We just saw either for Rabbi Yishmael it's Va'ani Avarachim, or at least it's according to, or even according to Rabbi Akiva, the Kohen himself gets reward for performing this blessing. So if so, it's unclear why the Beit Din should enforce Birkat Kohanim. Isn't it a mitzvah naseh shematan schara b'tzidah? That's the kasha of the Pri Megadim. What we're going to do is we're going to look at a couple of different answers and just kind of maybe take a look at methodologically, right, what each of them are all doing and how they all solve this problem of this problem brought up by the Pri Megadim. So the first answer is going to be in answer to tshuva in a work of tshuvot called the Ta'am Baruch. His name is Rav Baruch Eliezerovsky, a late 19th, early 20th century posek, who I believe was killed in the Holocaust, and Achron, European Achron, I believe Polish, and he addresses this question. He's like, look, the Pri Megadim's question is a good question, V'im ken shapir yesh l'teretz hakushya al Pri Megadim. I have a good solution for the Pri Megadim's question. When is it that we don't force people to perform these kinds of mitzvot? Right? If there were a specific, right, if there were a specific reward for the Kohanim as kind of in exchange for or as a reward for their bracha. Aval kan, lefi Rabbi Yishmael, מה שהברכה מתרכזת על הכהנים איננו שכר מיוחד לכהנים בעד ברכתם, אלא שנכללו תוך הברכה שמברכים הם את ישראל. Right? How are we going back to the way that the Breita, or the way that Rabbi Yishmael formulated his position in the Breita? Rabbi Yishmael says, "Va'ani avarachem," right, and I will bless them. I will bless them, the Kohanim. Saying, according to Rabbi Yishmael, what's going on is not they bless Israel, and as a reward, I, Kadosh Baruch Hu, bless the Kohanim. No, it's in their action of blessing Bnei Israel, I will bless not only Israel but also them. AKA, they too will be included in the bracha that falls onto all of Am Yisrael. It's not reward in that sense. It's just that they're included in the klal. Right? The bracha that the Kohanim get is not kind of something in exchange for or as reward for the fact that they blessed other people. But their blessing of all of Am Yisrael kind of includes them blessing themselves. And because of that, it's not schar. And if it's not schar, then it's a regular mitzvah aseh, and it's not a mitzvah aseh shematan schar b'tzidah. Right? The bracha of the Kohanim isn't reward for their performance of the mitzvah. Rather, they're included in the category among the kind of category of the blessed. So this solves the kushya of the Pri Megadim for which shita? For the shita of Rabbi Yishmael. For the shita of Rabbi Akiva, the question still stands because Rabbi Akiva learned the bracha for the Kohanim from Va'avaracham v'arachecha. There it sounds much more like a sort of exchange. So here solves the problem for Rabbi Yishmael, but not for Rabbi Akiva. Second answer, we're going to look in the Mishnah Lamelech. The Mishnah Lamelech is not actually addressing specifically the kasha of the Pri Megadim, which he was writing before the Pri Megadim, but was writing about a different mitzvah. He was writing about the mitzvah of ha'anaka, which is right ha'anek ta'aniklo, that a master who is setting free a slave has to give him parting gifts basically. And there too, it seems like a mitzvah, right? It says uveracha mikol asher ta'aseh, something like that, right? There is some blessing associated with this mitzvah that comes at the end of that parashia, and yet he's addressing the a ruling in the Rambam, I believe, that one can force people to perform the mitzvah of ha'anaka, to in fact send off their freed slaves laden with stuff. So what does the Mishnah Lamelech say? Yep, everyone would agree that we force a master to do this. Where we only say not to force people, right, not to coerce on these kinds of mitzvot aseh. Right, it only counts as matan schara b'tzidah if the matan schara, if the reward is really written b'tzidah, like right there. Not that there is explicit reward in the Torah in exchange for this particular mitzvah, but that the reward is written right there. He goes, Mishnah Melech here goes into the psukim specifically as they pertain to mitzvah ha'anaka, because it says asher be'rachacha a couple of times. Which one is referring to the actual reward for the mitzvah? He says one that's not exactly adjacent. It comes a few psukim later. So too here. Now, how does that relate to our case, Birkat Kohanim? This too would seem to be dependent on the machloket tanaim between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, right? For Rabbi Akiva, he says how do we know that the Kohanim are also blessed? Not from Va'ani Avarachem, from the Parsha Birkat Kohanim, but from Bereshit, from Va'avaracham Avarechecha. So for him, is it a mitzvah aseh shematan schar b'tzidah? No. So Rabbi Akiva thinks, right, this solves the kushya of the Pri Megadim for which shita? For the shita of Rabbi Akiva. But for Rabbi Yishmael, the question would still stand. Right? It's right there. It's adjacent. So for him, it really is theoretically a mitzvah aseh shematan schar b'tzidah. So for right, this in some ways it works in sort of the reverse way from the position that we just saw previously, right? Here the reward has to be written adjacent to the mitzvah exactly in order to preclude coercion from the court. And for Rabbi Akiva it solves the problem, but for Rabbi Yishmael the question would still stand. Just going to look at 1/3 answer, a solution brought by Rav Avram Stern, a contemporary-ish Haredi posek, a student of Rav Chaim Kanievsky. In which, right, he says, right, we have to understand the reason why Beit Din isn't coercing you to fulfill mitzvot shematan schar b'tzidah. Right, Tekivan de'eino rotze b'schar hakatzuv lo min hashamayim al asiyat ha'aseh ein kofi. Right, people, right, let's say, right, shiloh hakim, your classic mitzvah aseh shematan schar b'tzidah. I think it's l'man yitav lach, l'man yarich l'yamecha. Right, if I'm willing to forgo that mitzvah, and I'm voluntarily giving up my schar, right? I'm like on some level, if the mitzvah clearly comes with schar and I can choose to opt out, I can choose to opt out. The Beit Din basically throws their hands in the air and says, "That's your problem." Kol zeh im hamitzvah rak letovato, but that really would apply only if the mitzvah was primarily for one's own good. Aval birkat kohanim, af she'kohen gam ken miparech. Right, it's true that the Kohen might be, blessed as a reward or blessed along with the rest of the people, but the point of the mitzvah is, right, it's a public-facing mitzvah. The point of the mitzvah, the Kohen is doing it on behalf of or in order to benefit everybody else. And, if it's a positive externality and I'm opting out, the court can say to me, don't opt out. We want Am Yisrael to be blessed. So, right, what's Rav Avram Stern saying here? The mitzvah itself, right, must only be or primarily be for the good of the person performing it in order to be considered, a mitzvah aseh shematan schar b'tzidah, and therefore preclude coercion from the court. It's an interesting question about this, and I haven't seen him answer it specifically, but the other kind of typical example, the one that we saw in the Gemara in Chullin, was kibud avayim. And so does this really mean that Rav Avram Stern thinks that the mitzvah of kibud avayim is primarily not for my parents, but actually for me? And that would be an interesting little maybe theological, maybe ethical question about like when we're honoring other people, especially our elders, right? Who is that really for? Is that really for them, or is that really for us? We'll leave that in parentheses for now. So just to kind of review the different shitot, right? How do each of these positions answer the Pri Megadim's question? So Rav Baruch Lazarovsky, right, that it's the blessing that the Kohanim receives, it's not really reward. They're just defined as part of Am Yisrael, and that's how they're right. In that sense, they're blessed. They're not blessed as reward. So it's not a mitzvah aseh shematan schar b'tzidah. An interesting extra kind of point I want to make here is, right, where's the chiddush? Is the chiddush in each of these positions, right, and how they answer the Pri Megadim's question? Do they answer it by saying, oh, there's something specific going on that you didn't realize was going on in Birkat Kohanim and in how the schar or the bracha works? Or are they saying, oh, there's something you didn't know about the rule of kol mitzvah aseh shematan schar b'tzidah ein Beit Din musarin alaha? Right? Is it a chiddush in Birkat Kohanim and in the bracha that the Kohanim receive? Or is it a chiddush in that principle about when kofir on mitzvot say and when not. So here, according to Baruch Lizarowski, it seems like there's no chiddush about the scope of the Beit Din's coercive capacity. It's a chiddush in how we understand the bracha of the Kohen. He's included in it, it's not reward for it. And how does this relate to our machloket Tanaim in the sugya? So his solution only really works for Rabbi Ishmael, because Rabbi Akiva learns that the Kohanim are blessed from Bereshit, and there it really is formulated as reward. What about the Mishnah Melech? Right? What does he say? He says the reward the Kohanim receive isn't adjacent to the text of the commandment. Right? Where's that chiddush? I guess that's really a chiddush about the scope of where and how the Beit Din can coerce. They're only precluded from coercion if it's written right there. Right? And that's what the Mishnah Melech is mechadesh here. And his solution works according to the position of Rabbi Akiva, who thinks that the Matan Schara is way out in a different sefer. Whereas for Rabbi Ishmael, it really is Matan Schara b'tzida in the Mishnah Melech sense. And finally, Rabbi Avram Stern, who says that it's because the mitzvah is not for the sake of or for the good of the person who's performing it, but it's for the sake of the broader community. That's why, of course, Beit Din can force you to perform it. What's the chiddush? It's certainly a chiddush about the scope of coercion on mitzvot. No matter how clearly and explicitly and adjacently matan schara is written by mitzvah, if the point of the mitzvah isn't for you, but is for all of Am Yisrael, then of course the Beit Din can force you. And that solution would theoretically work according to both shitot in our sugya, both the shita of Rabbi Akiva and the shita of Rabbi Ishmael. So just to sum up really quickly, we saw this machloket Tanaim about how to understand the words va'ani avarechein, whether it refers to a bracha that the Kohanim themselves receive as kind of part of or along with all of Bnei Yisrael and Birkat Kohanim, or whether it refers to God's assent to the bracha that the Kohanim are giving to Bnei Yisrael themselves. And we saw a little bit of the ramifications of what does that mean for the question of whether the Kohen's blessing is schar. Is it schar for their commitment to blessing Am Yisrael, or is it really just inclusion in that kind of broad category? Are they also blessed, or are they among the blessed? Thanks so much, and have a great Shabbat, and see you next week.